Hi, Tony DeWitt, Missouri appellate attorney, and a guy who likes to make the law make sense here on YouTube. Today we'll talk about something a little different. We're going to talk about what happened with Sha'Carri Richardson. So stay tuned. By now, unless you've been living under a cave in Afghanistan, you know that American sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson was suspended from the competition and will probably miss the Olympics because she tested positive for the presence of metabolites of marijuana. In a culture that generally claims that everything is somebody else's fault, Sha'Carri Wilson is a breath of fresh air. She went on TV and she said, basically, I'm not asking for sympathy. I knew what the rules were. I knew what would happen if I broke the rules, and I broke the rules. She took full personal responsibility for her positive drug test. And I think it's worth noting that that kind of behavior in an athlete is laudable. And she should be recognized for that. I've seen a lot of criticism of her, and I don't really understand that. You know, she had a tragedy in her family. She indulged in the hours and minutes after, learning of that. And I don't really think that's particularly blameworthy. There are really two questions that seem to come up in the context of her positive drug test. The first is whether the suspension is fair, and second, whether we should even have a law against the consumption of marijuana. Most states now have some form of legalization of marijuana, either for medicinal purposes or sometimes just outright legalization or decriminalization, if you will. And I think that that's probably the way that the country will eventually wind up going. And it will be treated very much like alcohol. And, you'll still wind up getting in trouble if you operate a motor vehicle or a boat or a plane under the influence of marijuana. But as you should. But there won't be these stigmas attached to it because it's marijuana. Now, the question about whether or not the suspension is fair. The suspension is fair, as she points out. She knew what the rules were and she broke them. And, when you become an athlete, when you compete at that level and you're aware of the rules, I can't really feel particularly sorry for you if you knowingly break those rules and you get caught. So I do think the suspension is fair. Now, there's been some really odd criticism leveled at the International Olympic Committee and at the American Olympic Committee for suspending Ms. Richardson. And the allegation that's been made is that it's racism. Well, a white person who develops a positive drug test is treated exactly the same way. There's no difference in how she's being treated because she's African American. No difference whatsoever. You certainly couldn't make the argument that the testing results are different because she's African American. Blood tests don't care what race you are. A blood testing machine can't tell whether you're black, white, or purple. So it really isn't a matter of racism, and I think most intelligent people understand that. And she's not being treated differently than any other athlete would be where they tested positive for that particular substance. Now, I think you can have a general conversation regarding whether or not that should be a banned substance under the Olympic rules. For one thing, it's certainly not a performance-enhancing drug. If anything, it's a performance-reducing drug, and you would expect that it would have a negative impact on a person's ability to compete. So it's not like she was gaining some advantage by taking this or by ingesting this. So I don't really understand why the Olympic Committee has this on here. other than perhaps to placate the United States, which still continues to impose fines and penalties and sanctions for people who transport marijuana across state lines. And again, I think at some point full decriminalization will come. I don't believe the government should be in the job of being your nanny and telling you what you can and can't do with your own body with respect to what substances you decide to ingest. I believe that people ought to be free to do what they want to do in that regard. I don't necessarily think that hard drugs like cocaine and opiates, and that sort of thing are proper or should not be regulated. I do believe they should be regulated. But I think marijuana is at such a low level that it's not necessarily a substance that ought to have the kind of draconian punishments that still exist for transport and that sort of thing. So that's the way I feel. I think, like I said, I think it's kind of a sad thing for Sha'Carri that she's not going to be able to compete. But I am very much appreciative of the fact that she took personal responsibility. And I think a lot of people could learn, something from her with regard to accepting responsibility when you screw up. Because there does tend to be a belief in society that you can push the blame off on somebody else whenever you screw up. And that just shouldn't be the way the world works. That's my take on Sha'Carri Richardson. If you found this interesting or helpful, or you think I made the right call here, I would really appreciate it if you give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, subscribe and touch the notification bell so you can get all of our videos. Thank you so much for watching. Have a terrific day.